Welcome. You are about to take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Buffet on the Love by Intuition show. For the next hour, allow her to prepare you in becoming a magnet for a profound love-infused relationship by identifying and focusing on solutions through love. Awaken the light within and let your essence shine. And now, here's Deborah Buffet on Love by Intuition, all part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
Welcome, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. And yes, here I am, founder and owner of the Dream Vision 7 radio network, Deborah Buffet, I like to say. That's the proper way of pronouncing it. And if you're tuning in for the first time, we are a full producing internet radio station. We're global. We have all the bells and whistles. You can listen in your cars, whatever country you're in. You can ask Alexa. You can listen online on your app, on our apps, or utilizing our app, should I say. And then you can just listen on demand if you choose to, or listen like this show, Love by Intuition, is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, I have welcomed back one of my favorite guests, who is Barbara Berger. She is American-born but has been living in Copenhagen, Denmark for some years now. And we had her just last month to talk about one of her new books. And then I had to have her back because she wrote her autobiography, and it's called My Road to Power, Sex, Trauma, and Higher Consciousness. And it's really a whole journal of back when she started in her late teens. The Vietnam War was going on. She left the USA. We're going to talk about a number of things. I call her, the book shows that she is, I feel, a Wonder Woman physically. Maybe she had low self-esteem, which I had. We did some parallels in our lives, but the book really showcases all her travels through countries like Afghanistan, countries that are really impoverished at the time, and women weren't valued at all. And I wonder how far we have come in the year 2023. But nonetheless, get the book because it's a journey through her whole life. It's very interesting. It's fascinating. You will start to think about your own life, and a lot of things can bubble up for you, which is a positive thing. And that we are all one. We are all interconnected. And I loved the book. Pulled me in, Barbara, because I believe because of because of that time, the hippie time, because I was part of that. There's a few years difference, but I was part of all that living in a different way. But without further ado, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Deborah. What a great introduction. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm so thrilled that you enjoyed the book so much. I mean, you're a person I really value, and we have been on the same pathway for many, many years, you and I. We are soul sisters, as you say. So hearing that you actually enjoyed reading the book so much, that means so much to me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And before we start, I just want to let the listeners know, because maybe we haven't done that, that you were well known in the Scandinavia countries because you started writing as a young girl, a voice for the American women. And you became an international author with two of your books that are in 30 languages. You started a macrobiotic health center in downtown Copenhagen. I mean, you are well known in Denmark and here in the USA. I want people to just sit up straight and listen and start reading some of your books because they are, really rich with wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, all my books are on Amazon, so if you live in the U.S., you can get them on Amazon, except for this new one, My Road to Power, my autobiography. Is not up yet on Amazon, but you can get it from my website. My website is beamteam.com. www.beamteam.com. So if you'd like to have the book, please go there. But yes, the background to this is actually I wrote a book called The Road to Power: Fast Food for the Soul quite a few years ago. My book, The Road to Power: Fast Food for the Soul. And that's the book that has become such an amazing international bestseller. And it's published in 30 languages. It's sold about 1 million copies around the world. And over the years, people have asked me over and over again, how did you learn all this? How did you get to be like this? And every time I meet people and start telling them a little bit, everybody always says, oh, can't you write it down? You better write a book about how your journey through all this. And so that's what I now have done. That's why this book is called My Road to Power. It's the personal side of The Road to Power, so they hang together in that way.
Sure. So you had a tumultuous childhood, and you actually, I know you didn't want to stay there, and the next thing you knew, the Vietnam War was going on. You met this guy. You ended up marrying him, and you left the USA.
Yeah, I just so people know, I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and my father, he worked in the Pentagon. He was a top military man. And so that's sort of where I grew up. And then I met Steve Berger, who was my boyfriend at the time, and then I ran away from home, and we got married. And then he got drafted to go to Vietnam. And that was at the beginning of the Vietnam War. It was before, the protest movements really got big. We were sort of the first wave, you could say. But anyway, Steve got drafted, and we left America because at that time, if you were a draft dodger, you went to jail for 5 years. And so we left, and we went to England, and there's a story about that in the book, too, and we got deported and sent back to the U.S., and then we went to Canada, and we were underground there for a while, and then we finally ended up in Mexico. After we had been on the run pretty much for 1.5 years. And we ended up the very first day, we had hitchhiked actually from New York City to Mexico City. That's quite a journey. It took us about 3 weeks. And on the very first day when we came to Mexico City, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know anyone. We didn't speak Spanish. We had nowhere to go. So we had $150 in our pockets, and we sat on a bench. We wandered around town, and then we came to this big park in the middle of Mexico City, and we sat down on a bench and just were staring into nothingness. We really felt afraid, hopeless. What are we going to do now? And then I remember I noticed there was this tall, very interesting-looking man who was sort of going around the park, and he had this big block of paper, and he was sketching people in the park. And then finally he came over to us, and he asked if he could sketch us. He said, you have beautiful faces. Can I sketch you? And we said, sure, go ahead. And so this guy, he sat down on the grass before us on the bench, and he started sketching our faces. And then suddenly he put his paper down, and he looked at us, and he said, what are you doing here? And we had been underground for 1.5 years and had been a lot of places, and we never, ever told anyone what we were doing. We always said we were students or we were visiting somebody. We never told the truth. But for some reason, actually it was me, I blurted out the truth and said we were running away from the U.S. Army. Steve had gotten drafted. We just got to Mexico City. We didn't know what to do. We didn't have any money, and we were scared. I just sort of blurted all that out. And then this man, he said, I'm from Sweden, and I'm a pacifist, And I think that you're doing the right thing. So you can go home with me to Sweden. I will take you to Sweden, and I will take care of you. Just like that. And
that's
did.
the part that's what amazed me, which is a little different in the world we live in today, that so many good people actually did help you and helped you both. And not only with food that would be needed at the time or showers or whatever it may be, but they took you on and became, your mentor in a sense, in different countries, different places, and opened up their wallets.
It turned out that this guy was a very famous Swedish artist. His name was Ragnar Johansson, and he took us back to Sweden, and it turned out that his brother was a well-known journalist on Sweden's biggest newspaper, like the New York Times of Sweden. And so when we came to Sweden, we became sort of minor celebrities because we represented the young generation in the United States who was actually against the Vietnam War. So we were on TV, and there were interviews with us, and actually, I was so traumatized at that time. I was only 20 years old when we ended up in Sweden. As a kind of self-therapy, I started writing down my experiences just to sort of deal with what had happened to us. And I was writing every day on this little typewriter that Ragnar Johansson had bought for me. And then this friend who came visiting, he said one day, "What are you writing all the time, Barbara?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, can I see it?" And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And then this guy, he took the manuscript, and then without me knowing it, he took it to one of the biggest publishers in Sweden, and they wanted to publish the book. So suddenly I became this well-known author, and I was famous in Sweden, and then in Denmark, and in Norway. And so it was like at the age of 20, with all these things that happened, and it was just so radical for me. But anyway, that's how I got to Scandinavia, that trip, and I'm still here.
Yes, and the other piece of it is you were the voice for young people, not only not going to war or didn't want to and didn't believe in what the war represented, but you were also a voice for hashish and different psychedelic drugs that you actually experimented with, and you were stoned a lot of the time. And what is amazing to me is your body was strong enough to, and maybe being stoned was better, traveling through cold weather and breaking down, and maybe the stoned part actually helped you deal.
I would say it's important to understand that for me, the search for higher consciousness or finding the divinity within, or as you say, love by intuition, awaken the light within. From a very early age, I had very powerful spiritual experiences. Although I didn't know at the time I didn't have the words. Yeah, I didn't have the words, but I experienced bliss consciousness at a very early age, and so it's once you've had that kind of experience, you spend the rest of your life trying to get back to that place. I call it Om Sati Ananda. So you could say whether it was traveling, drugs, all the different things that I experimented with that you can read about in the book, it was the driving factor has always been this bliss consciousness, which is the true reality, the divine energy. How do we? It's in all of us, but when we have had contact with it and then we lose contact with it, that's what we want, because nothing else compares to that.
That's right.
Yeah, and so you could say that there were many other young people when I wrote about these things, and I wrote a lot of books about all of these different things. It resonated with them. So yes, in that way, I was one of the spokespeople for this experimentation that was going on in the 60s. So, yeah, it was great.
I just think of how many years or decades has it taken for people that are incarcerated for having or selling marijuana. And a lot of people are getting released, but there are still more people, probably more in the south of the country, that are still in for such a minute thing. And now here we have legal medical marijuana, but it took all these years, and so many lives have been destroyed over a weed. And yet on the other side of the coin, we have pharmaceuticals that come with a couple of dozen of side effects that if the pharmaceutical doesn't kill you, it's the side effect that does, and that's okay. So there's just so much that go ahead.
Yeah, in the book there's an excerpt of an article that I wrote all the way back there in the 60s about, the different kind of drugs and criminalizing hashish and marijuana, all these things. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, and again, in the country, most countries where alcohol is legal and that people can get drunk and that can get violent, and I mean, there's no laws against alcohol. But hashish or marijuana, which makes you nice and relaxed, I mean, so it doesn't make any sense. And you think about the problems that we have in our society just because of alcohol, how many alcoholics there are, how many families that are ruined because of alcohol. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. So you're absolutely right, everything you say, Deborah.
Yeah, and change comes, but it seems like it's slow. But the good thing is people like yourself that bring it to the forefront, even if you weren't, even if you're young and you're in your early 20s and you're coming from that perspective, the bottom line is you're bringing it to the light, and that's a good thing. So, the other thing that happened once that book came out when I was 20, it was called The Journey, which is about, and then I became the spokesperson, so I had a lot of articles in the big newspapers, and then I was offered a job to write a weekly column in one of the big magazines where they only wanted me to write about this stuff from the young people's point of view. So I had a platform from an early age where I could do this, and I certainly did. I used it to the maximum that I could anyway to try to discuss exactly what we're talking about now. So yes, we have to speak up. We have to do what we can to enlighten whoever's around us who's willing to listen to what's going on. And that's what I try. I've always tried to do that. Right. Absolutely. Well, we only have a few minutes before our first break, but I wanted to delve into, we talked to her, or we know that as a young girl, you were in the silence and all that happened. But let's get into Mexico. And, when, as you have described, the portal to higher consciousness. When did that happen? Was it while you were sitting on the bench, tell the people, or was it when he took you, the artist guy took you and took care of the two of you? No, it was before that. It was actually on the way. Before we came to Mexico City. The train. The train ride was to Mexico City. It was on the way there. We had this grueling journey from New York. As I said, it had taken us several weeks. And before we came to Mexico City, we had been hitchhiking with this really crazy guy, and we were in Mazatlan, which is a city on the coast. And it was a carnival, and there was a lot of drugs, and I smoked some very powerful weed, and I freaked out because I was so traumatized to begin with. It was not a good idea. And I had this really bad experience and locked myself in the bathroom, and Steve tried to get me out. It was just horrible. So I had some really serious trauma there. And after that,
when I finally did calm down and I felt better again, the last leg of our journey to go to Mexico City was by train from Guadalajara to Mexico City. And in those days, I don't know how the trains are now, but it was a very, very slow, long train ride all night. And it took many, many hours. And we were sitting in a third-class train wagon. And in that third class, it was like the poorest of the poor people. And at that time, Mexico was not a wealthy country like it is today. It was really, really a poor country. And in that carriage where we were, there were like these wooden benches, and there were all these families with animals and chickens and children, and I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And suddenly, when I was sitting there watching all this going on, then I had this like breakthrough in consciousness. Something happened where I suddenly had that connection to, I don't know if you would want to call it the cosmic consciousness or higher consciousness or Satchidananda, but I suddenly saw the world, life, humanity, everything in a way that I had never seen it before and haven't seen it actually very much since either. The interconnectedness, the love, the way it all fit together, it was like beyond words. There's no words that I can really find to describe it, though I try to. If you read the book, you will see I have a section where something that I wrote down right after that happened, where I tried to express in words that experience. But it was very, very powerful, and it really changed my life forever because I saw the interconnect. It wasn't just a mental thing. It was like, it was a visceral, spiritual, real-time, here and now, beyond words understanding. That's why I'm having difficulty explaining it, because there are no words when you see in that way.
Yeah.
And I did for a while.
Yes. And that's what you strive to recreate as you went along, which is exciting and fun. So, but hold any more thoughts, because we need to take our first break. Everyone, when we come back, if you'd like to call in and ask a question or talk with Barbara and I, Bob is in the house, and toll-free is 833-220-1200. We'll be back in a moment.
Experience a different yet profound healing with Reconnective Healing. Includes yet expands beyond any and all known forms of energy healing. The Reconnective Healing spectrum is comprised of the full healing and evolutionary continuum of energy, light, and information. It allows for healings that are not just physical, not just mental, not just emotional, yet go beyond that to bring healing that includes the evolution of your very being and essence. Deborah Beauvais, trained and certified by world-renowned Dr. Eric Pearl, offers appointment hours at Seekonk Family Chiropractic in Seekonk, Massachusetts. For questions or to set up both distance or local sessions, call Deborah at 508-431-1959. Again, 508-431-1959. Or go to lovebyintuition.com. That's lovebyintuition.com.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
After narrowly surviving the attack on Sandy Hook Elementary, first grade teacher Caitlin Roy DeBellis was left searching for answers that would never come. Eventually, she chose to focus on questions that could be answered. How do I make sure this tragedy doesn't define us? How do we get our control back? Those two questions led her to found the 501c3 nonprofit organization Classes for Classes. When gifts poured into their classroom, she decided they would help someone else by paying it forward and being kind. This developed into a social network which allows K through 8 classrooms to connect so that every student in the United States can learn these crucial lessons. Classes for Classes' mission is to build students' social emotional intelligence by connecting them to care. All C4C projects are crowd-funded. Any teacher in the U.S. can visit classesforclasses.org. That's classes, the number 4, classes.org. Sign up today.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we are back, and if you would like to call in, Bob will put you through. It's 833-220-1200. We are talking with Barbara Berger. I had asked her to come back. She's been on the show many times, and you can go on DreamVision7Radio.com, the number 7radio.com, and just go on the Love by Intuition archives, put in her name, Barbara Berger, Berger, and up will come all these MP3s, audios that you can listen on demand. But this time around, she has finally written her autobiography, and it's called My Road to Power, Sex, Trauma, and Higher Consciousness. You can get that book on her site because it's brand new. It's Beam Team, Beam as BEAM Team, TEAM.com. Now, before the break, Barbara, you were talking about that higher consciousness feeling and wanting to, trying to articulate it and wanting to replicate it. And then I'm thinking, moving on to that next section for higher consciousness, did you find that doing any of the drugs, did they bring you to that exalted consciousness where you just, like you have, like the experience on the train, were you able to duplicate that with drugs?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about basically the death of the ego, that we go beyond. I mean, the rational mind, the ego, the personality, the linear comprehensive way that we are programmed and deal with life. When we go beyond that, to find out who we really are, you could say the divine prototype, the higher self, it's a higher level of consciousness that we usually don't have access to. And the great spiritual traditions I have learned now, that's what they're about. I mean, meditation, spiritual practice is to become aware of the nature of reality, that we're not just mind and thoughts, and to go beyond that. But yes, drugs can be used as a way of accessing that level of consciousness. So when I was younger, when I came to Denmark, I lived by a beauty. So then I was together with a Danish guy, toured, and we tried psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, all of those mind-expanding drugs I have tried. But I think it's probably wiser to try to access these states without having to take chemicals. But
I would say yes.
Yes.
I would agree with you because my next thought, or while I was reading the book, I was thinking, oh my gosh, did you have any fear of? See, I'm the total opposite. my sister and I, when we were in high school, we were in the ladies' room, and we tried puffing on a cigarette. We both choked and said, this isn't for us, and we never touched a cigarette again. And then the next thing would be doing weed, which I tried, but I don't like, and this was back a while, but I don't like that feeling of not being in control of my space and in fear of if something did happen, I wouldn't be able to defend myself. And that may be because of something that happened when I was a little girl, and that probably fed into that. But I was amazed that you weren't afraid of taking anything, where I would be like running as fast as I could if someone offered me something.
Well, I wouldn't say I was as brave as you make it sound, but because I had a lot of bad experiences also. But I felt, I mean, the time I grew up in, it was like break on through to the other side. The people that I looked up to, the people who, there's quite a few people that actually, I mean, died taking drugs, like. You know, that you wanted to go further, you wanted to break down the barriers, and I think growing up as I did in such a boring, confined, limited environment in the suburbs of America in the 1950s, how are we going to break down these walls and go beyond that? And so getting stoned was one of the ways to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I write about. Yeah.
And, you know, it's an unfortunate way of thinking. Unfortunate because for the way that things are today, now you've got a lot of heavy-duty drugs. They're underground, and they're laced with everything else, and people are dying. And, you know, the opiate. Yes, and it is what it is. So, I mean, we have that mess, and yet some of the things that were back in the 60s and 70s could bring the same effect, zone you out, soften the emotions, because a lot of
people work with this today. I mean, like there's different people who have some. I mean, again, if you're going to do this kind of thing, I believe that you should have a guide. You have to have somebody with you to guide you through what you're going to experience. You have to be prepared. It's just like you're not allowed to drive a car if you haven't got a driver's license. And taking mind-expanding drugs for spiritual practice means that you have to be prepared in the same way. You need a teacher. You need to understand what you're getting into. And so it is complicated. But there are people who offer these kind of things today, too. So if you're going to do it, I would highly recommend that you go somewhere where you will have a guide and who will hold your hand and tell you what's going to happen, so you're going to be prepared.
Right. Yes. So at what point, and there's a section that you actually chose it to address today, at what point did your journey become spiritual?
I really think that there maybe I could read that page where I describe that.
Yes.
I think that's
do.
I think that's a really interesting part of my awakening journey. Let me see, where was it? Here, page
136.
Yeah. So at what point did my journey become spiritual, a spiritual quest? Or was my journey, my pathway, always a spiritual quest? What happened along the way that turned my political and social protests into a search for higher consciousness? Or were they always entwined right from the beginning as part of my soul imprint, as a part of who I am, as a part of where I'm going? When I say it like this, it feels right. It feels right and true and correct to say that the yearning for higher consciousness, for liberation from worldly cares, for spiritual understanding has always driven me. Maybe I didn't have the language back then to express it like this, but the drive was there. The yearning was there right from the beginning, and I always knew it. I guess it hangs together with the feeling I had from the beginning that I didn't belong in the family I was born into, and that the culture I was growing up in was so superficial and materialistic that I knew from the beginning there was something more, something much more to living than making money and achieving a material success. All those superficial things were just too stupid, too primitive, and too unfulfilling in the long run. Because, yes, I knew from the start that striving for things like this would get you nowhere. It would get you nowhere and give you nothing but heartache. And the one thing I didn't want more of was heartache. In fact, I wanted the opposite. I wanted liberation from the heartache of life in the world. I'd already had more than my share of heartache. What I wanted was liberation from the suffering I was experiencing and that I slowly discovered everyone around me was also experiencing. And yes, there was poverty and injustice. I could see that, obviously. And it broke my heart. But what did this poverty and injustice arise from? How did people become so greedy that the world was divided between rich and poor? How did it happen that we lost our original understanding that we are all one human family who should love and care for each other? How did that come about? From the beginning, I knew that it could only have arisen because we lost the true understanding of who we are and where we came from and where we are going. Nothing else could have taken us so far from the path of righteousness and right living. Nothing. So I knew all this from the beginning. It was the calling of my soul, the calling to go up higher, to find a way that would lead me out of the maze of misunderstanding that brought me to where I was, that brought me to the veil of suffering I walked in, the veil of suffering everyone else was walking in too. It was the world's condition, the world's confusion. We were all lost, all of us. I knew it from the beginning, from my earliest days. And somewhere along the way, during those tumultuous years on the road, I discovered that I couldn't work for the liberation of the world if I couldn't find it for myself. So politics and social causes had to become the spiritual quest for me. They were one and the same, and they still are.
I love that portion. I actually pulled that aside because I loved what you found through your journey.
Well, that is what I found out. I mean, the people that I look up to, I mean, for example, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi, he was the great force for good in the world, and he was an activist, and he was very political, but he was into spirituality. His whole life was a spiritual journey. He meditated on the Bhagavad Gita every single day of his life. So all of these things, the evolution of consciousness, it leads us to the same place where your program is called Love by Intuition, Awaken the Light Within. I mean, that's the only solution to any of this.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, during that time that you were young, did you realize that you really that you had the lack of love for self? Did it cross your mind at all when you were in your early 20s?
Not in the way that you formulate it now, but I mean, I know that I came from a background that was dysfunctional. So again, if that's what you mean, I was really aware of that from an early age. But it was more the ignorance that was around me that I was so aware of. I don't know if I didn't have the therapeutic dysfunctional. The books that I've written lately about dysfunctional families and therapy and so on, I didn't have the terminology, but I knew that something was wrong. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think most people at that age don't realize what, they're usually in the turmoil and the trauma so much that they really can't bring it back to themselves. It's usually everything on the outside. It's not until, I'm not saying there are probably many people that are young and have found the truth of who they are early on, but some of us older people, we don't get started until we're like in our early 50s. And so I was just curious how you looked at that now.
I don't think that it's a good idea to generalize in this way, because if you look at the evolution of the soul, that's really what we're talking about, the different levels of consciousness as the soul evolves, and as we become more aware of the soul. But that, again, if you go back, say, to Buddhist philosophy, they have this, about reincarnation, and that every soul is on this journey of evolution, and that when you leave the physical body this time, the level of consciousness that you have when you depart, that's the level of consciousness you start with in the next incarnation. That's why they go looking for the Dalai Lama after he passes over, because they look for the child who has that level of consciousness as the next Dalai Lama. So I don't think we can generalize and say that all people are at different levels of consciousness, and that's really important that we understand it, because otherwise it's too confusing. What one person knows at the age of 20, somebody won't even get until they leave this life, and they have maybe 10 more lifetimes. So you can't generalize as far as I can see.
Right, and I don't think I was generalizing in the consciousness part. I'm generalizing in the low self-esteem, unworthiness and all of that. I feel strongly that probably and I've said this before on many shows, it's like 90% of the human population, struggles with that from early on. And some of us aren't aware of what the root, why we feel that way, or where the root cause is until much later in life.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
If we're lucky. That's right. That's right. If we're lucky. Well, we need to take our next break. More with Barbara Berger when we come back. Don't go away.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be love. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Are miracles real? Can you move from mayhem to miracles? 30 prominent authors say yes as they share their high fives and down lows of challenges, abuse, addiction, and love. Experience hope, the magic elixir of miracles, through the personal stories of New York Times bestselling authors James Redfield, Dr. Bernie Siegel, Sister Jenna, Reverend Temple Hayes, and many more. If you like bestsellers, chaos to clarity, and crappy to happy, you'll love crying and laughing through mayhem to miracles. Sacred stories of transformational hope. Available now on Amazon and in bookstores worldwide.
It's a child's job to play, to learn, and to have fun. It's an adult's job to keep them safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18? Every day, families enter the Children's Advocacy Center because a child's courage to tell someone what happened to them. Keeping our children safe starts with a conversation. This is Michelle Aranger, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center. Learn more on how to keep your child safe. Visit cacofbc.org. This message made possible by the Fall River Rotary Club.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
We are talking a lot about the book, My Road to Power, Sex, Trauma, and Higher Consciousness. And there's so much more to the book. The journey of Barbara Burger since she was, 20 and a little bit younger. So get the book is the bottom line. Okay, get the book, and it's not out yet. So you go on Beam Team, Beam, B-E-A-M, Team, T-E-A-M.com, and get your copy. And get a couple copies because if you listen to the show, you know how I adored reading, and I believe that it helps you grow, it helps you learn about yourself, it helps you learn about other people, and it's so enjoyable. It takes you away from where you are at the moment if you're looking for a little escape and maybe not some LSD. I had to put that in there. But anyway, get a couple of books. So we're running out of time. But I just want to correct, it is out, but you can only get it at the moment on my website. It hasn't come up on Amazon yet, but it is published and it's ready to go. So if you'd like to have a copy, you can order it on our website. Thank you. That's right. I'd like to talk a little bit about, there's so much to talk about with your travels and how you survived the cold. I don't know how you, and I know you were young, but still, that's a lot. Hitchhiking, traveling to different countries, surviving there when you don't know anyone, but you had good luck with people that came from their hearts. But I want to jump to the how you became the Wonder Woman. You can do it now. You realized that you didn't have to depend on anyone and you could be whoever you wanted to be. And there was a group of editorial type men that took you in and they were inspired by you. And then you flourished from there because you realized how much you've accomplished, and you started, I believe, reading the book that you really had value. And the book is You Can Do It, Woman, and that's available. That's available in Scandinavia, in Denmark, Sweden, places like that. Correct? Well, actually, what happened? You could say the turning point for me was when I discovered the power of the mind. I discovered that our thoughts, our thinking created our reality, and that we were the only choice maker in our own mind. And that if we could take control of our minds and focus on the good energy, the positive, the strength that we had, that we could change our lives and turn it around. And actually, one of the most powerful spiritual experiences I've had, I write about it in the epilogue at the very end of the book. Right. When my book, The Road to Power, Fast Food for the Soul, was channeled to me. Maybe I could share that experience because that was a really, really powerful experience. Okay. I had, at that time, it was in 1994. I was already a well-known author. I had written all these books that were all published, and This Woman You Can book, all of that. So I was really well-known. And I was very busy. I was a single parent at that time. I had 3 sons, so I had to make money, and I did all of that, and I was really stressed out of my mind. And at that point in time, I decided, I had that calling from within again, Barbara, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take a break from all this. So I decided to take a 3-week vacation, and I told everybody that I was going far, far away so nobody would call me and nobody would try to find me, but it didn't go anywhere. And in fact, I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, and north of Copenhagen there are beautiful woods and beaches, and so for those 3 weeks I went by myself every day on my bicycle, and I went in the woods, and I prayed, and I meditated, and I went swimming in the beaches and so on. And on the very, very last day, when I was starting to calm down and starting to feel better,
I didn't have any special plan, but on the very last day, I went to the beach when the sun was going down, and there was no one there, and I was sitting there meditating quietly by myself, enjoying the bliss consciousness, and suddenly I heard a voice. It was like I got a knock on the head, and I heard a voice, and the voice said, Barbara, you're going to write a book, so take out a pencil and paper. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting, so I did. So I took out my paper and a pen, and then the voice said, you're going to write a book, and the name of the book is The Road to Power. And so I wrote that down, and then it said, chapter 1 is going to be, and it said the name of the chapter, and it's going to be about this and this and this, and I wrote it down. And then, so this voice, it dictated all of the chapters, what each chapter was going to be called and what each chapter was about. And I wrote it all down, and then the voice said, now go home and write it. And it was like, oh, my God. I had heard about people who channeled information, or I had heard about things like this, but that it would actually happen to me. And it did.
Right.
And so then I went home, and I wrote this book, and it was really easy to write it. It just sort of flowed out of me. It was as if it was just writing itself. And the interesting thing that happened, and then I sent it to my publisher, and as I said, by that time I was a well-known author, and I had published a lot of books. My publisher refused to publish it. They said that they criticized it, that it was too simplistic, and that the ultimate insult was that it was fast food for the soul. I thought, brilliant. So that's how the book got the subtitle. The Road to Power, Fast Food for the Soul was, I thought, perfect, because that's what it was. And so we tried all kinds of things, and nobody would publish it. So I decided, since this book was channeled from above, that I would publish it myself. And that if nobody wanted it, I would just give the books away, because I felt that this is what the universe had delivered to me, and this is what the universe wanted me to do. So I did it. And at the same time, when first of all, we translated it to Danish, because we were here in Denmark. My son translated it to Danish, and we did the Danish, and we did a very special book. On one side of it was in Danish, and on the other side it was in English. So it was a dual language book. And one of the people I had been helping for many years was one of Denmark's most famous women writers. And I had been coaching her for years, and she was in hospital with cancer, and she had gotten this manuscript, and she read it after she was operated on, and she got better. And the way the universe works, it was so interesting. The day that the books were delivered to my office, where we were going to just give them away, this woman got out of hospital, and she was really, really famous, and she wrote a full-page article that came in the Sunday section of the biggest newspaper in Denmark, and so everybody wanted the book suddenly. And so this book, which has been taken care of by the universe, it's still going strong. I actually have several countries now who are publishing new editions of it, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th printing. It's in 30 languages, and I hear from people all the time that this book, The Road to Power, Fast Food for the Soul, was the book that turned their lives around. So for some reason, the universe chose me to be the channel for that book, and I'm so happy that I was, and it was such a great experience.
It's phenomenal, because the whole story on all the pieces, how she wrote the article, had she not even written that, you'd be in a different place. But it was channeled, so it was driven by the universe. Well, we only have a couple minutes. I want to thank you for coming on again, but I want to ask you, how do you see the world today, being back there and all that you've seen, traveling internationally and all? How do you see the world today?
The world is really, really challenged today. A lot of serious stuff going on. And each one of us has a responsibility to be the highest and best version of who we can be. That's what the world needs more than anything else. The love that's within us, that we have to go there, we have to feel it, and we have to use all the power that we have for good now, here and now. I believe that that's our responsibility, each and every one of us. And each and every one of us has some gift from the universe. Some have many and some have maybe not quite as many. It doesn't matter. We all can do something no matter where we are. So please do.
I agree. And that was beautifully said. Thank you. So everyone,
thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's so important for everyone to get the book because there's so much in there. I mean, we didn't even talk about the center that you opened up, the macrobiotic, and how you and two were devoted to that, and all that. You had people, you bought all the food, you had them in, they grew so large, people were looking, you were speaking about it. It was a whole chapter in your life.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it was a movement for sure. So everyone get the book, share the show, listen to this again, pass it on, and go to dreamvision7radio.com and get our app so you can take us wherever you go at any given time. So until we come together again, au revoir.
Are you seeking a clearer path to love? Then tune in to the Love by Intuition show next week. All designed to your highest good. To contact Deborah Buffet, owner of Empowered Connections, call her at 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or link on to lovebyintuition.com. Remember, we are all one. And we are all part of the miracle of love.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.